This is Andy Orm of O'Reilly Media. I'm talking to the author today of Appcelerator Titanium Up and Running. This is John Anderson who's joining me. Welcome.
Thank you, Andy.
So Titanium is one of these cross-platform web development tools, and we've heard some complaints recently that these tools are not good enough, that you should go native. What is your opinion about Titanium and its use?
Right. I mean, yeah, and I think that's kind of a big misconception that, a lot of people have about titanium. I mean, things like PhoneGap and Cordova are, really popular now. They give people a lot of power in that they allow developers to use a lot of their, web skills and JavaScript skills and CSS and HTML5, to produce, what seems like a native app, but it's really, an embedded web view in a kind of an app wrapper. And when people hear that Titanium uses JavaScript, they kind of automatically lump Titanium into that same category that, all right, it's running in a web view, it's, using HTML5, and it's kind of suspect to all those issues that, they're hearing about that, places like Facebook are making kind of, popular these days. But I think the one thing that people need to know about Titanium is that although it uses JavaScript to make, app development a lot easier than Objective-C or Java, the end product is using 100% native controls. It's not using an embedded web view. It's not using any kind of web technologies other than the JavaScript language. So you end up with a much more fluid, a much more responsive, app in the end. I mean, it allows you to use the native controls, which are designed to run on a particular operating system. So on iOS, you get iOS-looking controls. On Android, you get Android-looking controls. And that's especially important on Android because a lot of times you might have someone that's running Android on a great piece of hardware. You might have somebody running Android on something that's not so great. And native controls are always going to run better, especially on Android. Native controls will give you a more responsive app, and it's going to give people that native Android look and feel that they're used to, in other apps. So I think one thing people need to understand, even though it's using JavaScript, it compiles out to native controls for a much more, fluid and responsive app in the end.
It certainly seems like the libraries are pretty comprehensive. They give you access to a lot of stuff on from the native libraries on iOS and Android.
Well, right, and that's another thing I really like about Titanium is that they don't hide any of the, even though it gives you some great cross-platform abilities, they don't hide, platform-specific controls and functionality from you. So on iOS, if you're going to be doing something on an iPad and iPad is the only users, of the app, then you can use things like the split view controller and the popovers that only exist on the iPad. On Android, you can access things like the menu button, the hardware menu button. You can enable that to have your own menu selections, and that's an Android-only feature, but Titanium still gives you access to that. So it's up to the developer, to figure out how much of these platform-specific, features that they want to implement in their app. You can make it very platform-specific, or you can, make less use of those features, so it'll be a little easier to have the same code base run across, multiple devices. But I think the really important thing to realize here is that the tool isn't going to limit you from anything. It's up to the developer to decide, okay, for this particular app, which platform-specific features do I want to implement and which ones, do I want to stay away from.
And you've developed a sort of wrapper library to help to further hide the differences between platforms.
Right, right. I came up with what I call a compatibility layer, and titanium's great. It depending on what kind of features you're implementing, the same code base can either be 100% cross-platform, or not so much. And even there's a few little hidden gotchas here and there that even implementing, very similar functionality, the syntax might be a little different depending on what platform you're running on. So I developed this compatibility layer that gives me the ability to, let's say I'm creating a table view row And there's some subtle differences, between how you instantiate it and control it in iOS versus Android. This compatibility layer is, a series of functions that I'll call one of my compatibility layer functions then to create a table view row, and then this compatibility layer function deals with the differences between iOS and Android, and then the application that you're developing doesn't have to deal with that. So over time, I've built up, some of these functions that kind of smooth out the differences between iOS and Android, and just some other functions that are pure, convenience functions. And then I can just take this library from app to app, and as I find something else that needs a little smoothing out, I can enhance that. But then the important thing there to realize is that the application doesn't have to worry about those differences, and then this compatibility layer can take care of that for you.
And there are a lot of interesting libraries that deal with social media and other interesting real-life uses. Do you want to mention a few of those?
Right. I mean, right. I mean, that's kind of a good lead in for another kind of nice feature of Titanium, and that even from the very beginning, it had a concept of, being able to accept plugins, to enhance kind of the core functionality. There's the core Titanium framework, which can kind of accept these plugins to provide additional functionality on iOS and Android. And Appcelerator has a whole marketplace of these modules that you can download, plug in, and then very easily you can access some advanced functionality, like barcode scanning, like you're saying, some of the social media things like Facebook integration, accessing Twitter. So that modular plugin kind of architecture just gives you a really nice way to make use of the core, Titanium functionality for, say the 90% of what an app needs to do. But then if you want to do something that's a little more, not included in the core libraries, then you could just take these modules, drop them in, and very easily, make use of, some functionality that was written for you, just, making your app development that much faster.
Titanium also makes use of some of the object model of JavaScript to let you extend Titanium, and you've shown how to do that in the book.
Right. I mean, and that's why I think, for Titanium to be using JavaScript, it's a very accessible language. It's a language that a lot of companies probably already have in house. There are other products that do a similar thing as Titanium, but they use some languages like C#. And that's fine for a company that might have that talent in house. But JavaScript is nice because it's very widely known, very widely used, and it's very flexible. Like you're saying, it allows to extend some of the core functionality of Titanium just by using the prototype functionality of JavaScript. You can easily add extra functions to some core Titanium objects. And the ability to very dynamically add properties and methods to an existing JavaScript object really come in handy. For instance, on a table view row, you might want to attach, make a property, a small JSON document that has a little extra information that you want to reference, so that when a user is using your app and they tap on a table view row, an event is fired, that you'll have a callback function, to handle that event. But then any information that you attach in JavaScript onto, Titanium objects will be passed through in that event. And then your event handler can then, use that data to, very easily get at, some, specific information, that's kind of linked to that event.
So it's making use of the features of the language that were meant to be very open, and it's doing that.
Right. And that just makes it even easier for things like this compatibility layer that I developed, or making little JavaScript, kind of factories that you might want to use to, okay, I want to write my own little factory that's going to create a Titanium object, but then, kind of do a little manipulation. For instance, it allows you to make, kind of what I like to call these composite objects. And that Titanium, it might have a slider and it might have a label control, as native objects, but they don't have any native objects that kind of tie those two things together. So it's very easy to write a JavaScript function that will create a native slider. It'll create a native label, and then it'll kind of wire up the internal events that are needed so that when you're moving the slider, it'll update the label with an appropriate value. But then it just returns this composite control as one control that the app developer can just use, and it just allows you to make kind of some of these custom controls that are still based on native controls, but with the ease of doing it in JavaScript.
Great. So they recently announced that Appcelerator is going to start supporting Windows. What kind of strategic move is this, do you think?
Right, and that's making a lot of people happy, I think. And I think from the very beginning, Titanium or Appcelerator always, wanted to build a tool that would allow you to easily make apps that are cross-platform, and now that, it's really catching on and it's really getting popular, just increase, pulling more operating systems in kind of the Titanium family, so to speak, is just going to make it, that much more powerful. I mean, Windows, Phone is out there. It's an operating system that people are liking and wanting to see more apps on. It doesn't have, the market share of iOS and Android, but, it's another platform out there that Titanium is trying to support. And it's just going to make Titanium more popular by, including more, operating systems that you'd be able to build apps in a very similar way, but now it'll be able to, run on Windows devices as well.
Maybe we can get some Windows developers to extend your compatibility layer when it's ready.
Right, and that'd be great. I mean, that it's a cool concept. It allows you to kind of encapsulate a lot of common functionality, and it's one of those things that the more people that can get involved in it and contribute to it, the better it's going to become.
And the one important platform we didn't discuss at all was Blackberry, but actually Appcelerator supports at least the old Blackberry. Have you heard anything about whether they're going to support the new one that's come out?
Right, right. I mean, I've actually used the version of Titanium that would support, kind of like you're saying, the old version of BlackBerry, and it worked well. It allowed you to get apps on that platform. The API wasn't quite as robust as on iOS and Android, just because I'm sure Appcelerator has to decide where they're going to put their resources, and they have to do what they think makes sense. But right, they announced last December, early this year, that with the new BlackBerry Z10, they're coming out with a version of Titanium that will be able to create apps, for the Z10. And that's kind of in the same boat, I think, as Windows, is that I think Appcelerator is trying to show that Titanium is capable of, supporting whatever, platforms are popular and people want to use. So they're showing that they can, support Windows, and they're, making inroads into the Z10, arena. So it's just a matter of, what kind of, market share are those platforms going to get, and how much, popularity are they going to drive? But Titanium's just showing, okay, we can support, whatever different platforms are out there.
It also helps to keep the market competitive by supporting a variety of platforms.
All right, and it's one of those things that it's good for everybody. The more platforms it supports, the more it's going to attract new developers, and the more it's going to make, companies like Microsoft and BlackBerry happy that, they're going to be able to benefit by getting more apps onto their platform. So it's just, kind of a win-win situation for everybody as I see it.
Thanks for talking to me today, John.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Andy.